Well, it happened. After 5 long years, we finally got a release date for Breath of the Wild sequel. But despite being less than a year out, we still don't know anything concrete about the game itself or how it's changing. That's a bit frustrating, but you want to know the bright side? Yep, it means I'm still not too late to drop a sequel wish list for a Wii U game from 2017. And since this entire video will be invalidated the instant we get any real gameplay footage, I'm going to get right into it. Here's the top 5 things I want to see in The Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild to Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. Number 5. The Master Cycle. I'm sure that by now everyone knows that the Master Cycle is the best thing in Breath of the Wild, so I won't belabor this point. And normally that would mean we don't have to worry about it making it into the sequel, but this is Nintendo we're talking about. They've got a bit of a record of adding great features to their games, only to, forget about them for later installments. And that's why the Master Cycle is on this list. We all know that it should be included in Breath of the Wild sequel, but will it actually make it in? We won't know until the game's actually in our hands. I heard that the Master Cycle only exists in the first place because Aonuma kept badgering the game director about including it, so let's hope he kept up the good work. Number 4. Better housing. The house in Breath of the Wild is fine. It's a free bed to use, and the extra weapon slots are, of course, a godsend. It's a good sink for the rupees you'll be drowning in eventually, and it's always nice to have a place you can call home. But it's hard not to feel that it's underdeveloped, that they could have done a lot more with it. For example, why does the bed suck? It just refills your health. Other beds it ends throughout the game will give you extra hearts or stamina, so why is your very own bed, the one you built for yourself, so much less inviting? Being free, it might displace all the paid options, sure, but the cash and resources required to get to that point could easily balance it out. Beyond health and stamina buffs, an upgrade path for the bed could also include picking an effect you get when you wake up, like a 10-minute low-level speed or damage boost. But all that's just what I think you could do with the bed. Am I the only one who feels the absence of a garden? You spend so much of the game uprooting plants, it only seems natural that you get the chance to put a few back down. A garden would not only give you something to do at your house, but would also hook seamlessly into the rest of the game. Breath of the Wild is all about resource management. Maintaining a proper balance will give you reliable access to strong buffs, some of which you'll absolutely need. When a crucial element is missing from your pantry, you'll feel it. At such a time, your only choices are to trek back to where you know the resource spawns, or hope you'll stumble across more in the wild or in some vendor's inventory. Why not give players the option to take a more active role by allowing them to cultivate some of those resources themselves? Let them choose to cover chronic gaps in their inventory, produce more of what they use the most, or set up a cash crop for steady revenue by farming them. Since a lot of materials are biome specific, you could set up a biome synergy system where you need to spend materials from a biome in order to grow other materials from that biome. So if you wanted to grow something from the jungle biome, you'd first need to invest other jungle plants, fungi, and critters to reproduce that biome in your backyard. It would add another layer of relevance to items that might otherwise be of little use and start to clog up your inventory. Like how, in the dye shop, items that usually have no relation suddenly synergize by color. Now you're posing an interesting question to the player. Which resources do I need? Which resources do I have? And what combination can I put down now to get the most bang for my buck? Do I use what I have on hand, or do I need to go hunt something to kickstart the biome I want? But those are just the no-brainer ideas off the top of my head. There's surely other stuff Nintendo could have done with housing, just like adding more than one if they're going to insist on placing them in corners of the map really far out of the way. The point is, it was a bit of a wasted opportunity in Breath of the Wild, and I hope Nintendo exploits it more in the follow-up. Number 3. Hands. Raise your hand if you know this one. You're fighting a difficult enemy, or a mob of enemies. It's been a tough fight, but you've got a handle on it now. You're over the hump, in control, and all you've got left to do is whittle the enemy's health down a little more. You break a weapon, and open the menu to switch to the last weapon you think you'll need, only to realize you just broke the last weapon you had. Inches from the finish line, your eye on the enemy's remaining health bar, you try throwing a few bombs their way to push them across the finish line, but you know it's not going to be enough. You get smacked around for a bit before you admit defeat, and you slink away, seething about all the hardware you just wasted, wondering if some minute optimization would have saved you from failure. Yeah, it's not a good feeling. There's nothing as so demoralizing in Breath of the Wild as glancing between your empty weapon slots and an enemy on their last legs, knowing you could win if you had the tools, but feeling completely helpless without them. The kind of fury that instills, the indignation, is the kind that makes you want to beat something to death with your bare hands no matter how many hits it might take. And not being able to do so in a game as otherwise open as Breath of the Wild is a really jarring, dissonant experience. So that's what I'm proposing. Make Link's hands a weapon with which you can beat things to death. Now, I know what you're thinking. Wait, your hands wouldn't break like other weapons, would they? And if not, that would invalidate the weapon durability system that we all universally love and wish to see return in the sequel, wouldn't it? Well, maybe. But maybe not, if implemented correctly. Since Link's hands, presumably, would be a permanent fixture of your arsenal, they'd be a prime candidate for an upgrade path. And giving them an upgrade path means you've got an excuse to start them off weak. So while Link's hands can't break, they start off too weak to be anything other than a last resort. The final fallback against an enemy you weren't really prepared to kill, but have fought too much to run away from. As the game progresses, you earn upgrades for your hands that make them more and more viable, raising the damage floor to which your attacks can fall. Fists start to become a viable first-order choice against weaker enemies, but the stronger enemies you start to encounter still demand a real weapon. And even if you can get your hands strong enough to fight even the toughest enemies, they're still limited by their reach. Judging by Link's character model, they probably have at most half the range of the next shortest weapon class, in a game where enemies and their weapons are regularly twice your size and their reach twice yours. So there's always pressure to use something over your fists, no matter how strong you make them, and I don't think including them would invalidate the breakable weapons. Just give players an option when they don't want to use up their weapons, or a fallback when they've already done so. Number 2. Less menu. From managing materials, food, weapons, and clothing, to tracking quests, marking the map, and managing photographs, you probably spend a solid chunk of your Breath of the Wild playthrough in a menu. Some of this is unavoidable, sure, but a lot of it seems like it wasn't. For example, why do I have to reassemble the same ingredients each time I want to cook the exact same dish, again and again? Couldn't there be a way to favorite recipes so I can just click on the pot and select them from a radial or something? Shouldn't there at least be a quick way to recook the last dish, or select its ingredients with a single button press? And the weapon menu. When I'm scrolling through the weapon quick menu, I have 5 buttons at my fingertips. The shoulder buttons, plus the right stick click. And I guess I could take my thumb off the right stick and hit one of the face buttons if I really had to. So why do I have to open up the main menu and drag myself all the way over to the weapons section when I want to sort my weapons or to drop one? Why can't I just hit one of the available buttons from the quick menu? Some of these weapons you just can't throw away, you know. You have to use the menu. And repeat the same complaint for shields and bows. This makes your basic housekeeping a headache, but it's in combat that the menus really get obtrusive. Get into a rough spot with a tough enemy, and you'll probably spend more time in the food menu slamming snacks down your gullet than you will actually fighting. If you're really getting pushed, you'll probably start camping out the armor menu too. About to take a hit? Better pause, swap out those warm clothes for your toughest armor, take the hit, pause, then swap back. About to land a hit? Pause, swap on the barbarian set, unpause, hit, pause, swap back to the knight set or the guardian set or whatever your best defense is. Unpause. The intensity of the fight and your immersion in it just evaporates with every second you spend buried in one of these grids, and it's detrimental to more than just the flow of the gameplay. Being able to abuse the menu like this completely invalidates some armor sets' actual choices. I'm always just going to put on the climbing gear as soon as I grab a wall, and take it off as soon as I let go. For the Sheikah set, I'm just going to wear it while I'm sneaking up on someone, and take it off as soon as I'm in range for a sneak strike. Same deal for the Zora set. It goes on as soon as I jump in the water, and comes off as soon as I step out. Shouldn't they just be permanent upgrades at this point? What does the need to manually swap these on and then off really add to the game? And what's the point of upgrading these armor sets if I'll never, under any circumstances, choose to wear them in a fight? Now, I've thought about solutions to this. Eliminating the pause function, making the menu real-time, would help, since switching armor might actually bear a risk or a cost depending on the situation, as would using your consumables. But it does seem like a pretty heavy-handed change that might birth the new problem for everyone that it kills. Good luck breaking a horse in the early game, for example, if you can't chug a stamina potion while doing so. But despite the problems I see, this might have actually been the original design intent. We know that Nintendo originally intended to use the Wii U's touchpad as a real-time map before, ripping that feature out and pretending that the console never existed. They might have planned to leverage the touchpad for a real-time inventory menu as well, like they did for the Wind Waker remaster. So maybe Breath of the Wild was balanced with a real-time menu in mind, and the cracks I've outlined result from changing that. I'm hesitant to speculate much more on this, since the need for menus are determined by the gameplay systems, and we still don't know what mechanics they're putting into Tears of the Kingdom. I just hope Nintendo realizes how soul-crushing it is to get lost in these squares, and I hope that they try to minimize it for future installments. And the number one thing that I want to see in Breath of the Wild's follow-up is a proper magic system. Magic has been in enough Zelda games that it's nearly a series staple, to the point that the iconic row of hearts in the top left corner almost feels naked without the green bar hanging beneath it. So it's weird that the magic system was omitted from the game that would have given it the most room to flex its muscles. With its wide open world and interlocking systems, Breath of the Wild has plenty of hooks that could have been exploited by the pretty much boundless potential of magic. From combat spells like summoning freezing mist, imbuing weapons with elemental effects, putting a homing spell on arrows or thrown weapons, bringing your weapons to life to fight alongside you, laying elemental landmines, recalling thrown weapons, or conjuring a gale to make hostile arrows fly wide, to utilities like changing the weather or the direction of the wind, conjuring dancing lights to distract enemies, hurling cyclones, short-distance teleporting, disguising yourself as a plant, or mind-jacking animals. I meant mind-jacking like the thing you can do with the seagulls in Wind Waker, not the other way you could take. The sky really is the limit on what you could add. It's a no-brainer, an addition that would obviously bring a lot of depth and content to the game. The only question is, what shape would it take, and how would it fit on the controller? My answer is just to extend the existing rune system into a full-fledged magic system. Instead of a static set of abilities that stay with you from the start of the game to the end, limited by cooldowns, you instead get an expandable number of spell slots, where you can switch in spells from your collection, all costing a certain amount of magic meter to cast. The utility spells you need, stasis, magnesis, bombesis, etc., would still be present, and probably still given to you towards the beginning of the game, but now you can swap them for other abilities you find as you adventure. You might think it cumbersome to attach a resource cost to these utilities that you use constantly, but they don't need to drain much magic, if any at all. It definitely shouldn't be a one-size-fits-all thing. The cost of the spell should scale with its power, and attaching a cost to these spells would give you an excuse to make them, good. Now that your bombs aren't infinite, for example, Nintendo doesn't have an excuse to make them so weak. Maybe now you can use magnesis to rip enemies' weapons out of their hands, instead of just stealing them from behind their backs ahead of an attack. You might be thinking, wait, we have these utility spells available during 99% of the game for a reason. We need them to cross rivers, haul up chests, and boulder golf. Having the option to swap them for something else is a bad thing. It could be frustrating, yeah, not to have access to a bomb spell when you find a bombable wall, or to magnesis when you spot a chest at the bottom of a lake, but I'm not so sure this is entirely bad. Let me give an example to make my point. There is, in the Great Plateau, at the start of the game, in the margin of the cold zone, a dilapidated dock. There's a boat tied to the end, which you can use to cross the river, but the planks of the piers have fallen away, and there's no way to get to it. You can't swim to it, because the frosty water will kill you in seconds. If you try to jump on the posts that remain, you'll fall into the water and die. So how do you get to the boat? Well, if you look a bit upriver, you'll see a few trees standing along the bank. If you chop down the trees, the river will carry them up against the pier's posts, creating the bridge that you need to cross. It's a great environmental puzzle that tests your understanding of the world around you. You need to find the trees, know you can chop them down, understand that the resultant logs will float, and that the river's current will carry them up against the posts to where you want them. All of these are systems-driven phenomena that you will observe constantly throughout the game, but you need to mentally connect them all to solve this problem. It's a great little puzzle that primes the player on how the world works and how they can exploit it. However, that's only one solution to this puzzle. I'd say it's the more obscure solution, because if you come at the river from the opposite direction, you've probably already got
Cryonis.
And if you've got
Cryonis.
the solution is just to use it to make columns across the river you can jump across. It's totally straightforward and completely brain dead. You won't even realize there's a puzzle there. It's that easy. You might even completely overlook the boat, since crossing rivers with
Cryonis.
is simpler than any other options. And because you'll always have
Cryonis.
this kind of puzzle doesn't show up anywhere else in the game outside the Great Plateau. There'd be no point. And if they do show up, I didn't notice, because I was able to skip it using
Cryonis.
Do you see my point? The convenience of having some of these powers always available, without cost, invalidates some of the cool things that you can do with the world. There's no point in making any more puzzles like this, because players would just skip them, probably without even realizing there was a puzzle in the first place. Rivers could have been formidable in Breath of the Wild, requiring a careful survey of the land and creative use of resources to cross. But there's no reason to engage with those systems, no reason to make any kind of water puzzle, because
Cryonis.
totally invalidates them. But there would be a reason if there was a reason for players to forego
Cryonis.
if they found something more useful, or something just cooler, to replace it with, then they would have a reason to engage with those puzzles, giving the devs a reason to make them. Don't want to deal with the puzzle, or with rivers at all? Fine, keep
Cryonis.
You'll be rewarded for dedicating a slot to it. Don't mind the puzzles, or the challenge presented by the river? Then you've got an extra slot to play with. You can apply this logic to Reveille's Gale, too. It's controversial because it negates the climbing system, one of the coolest things in the game, and invalidates a lot of the climbing challenges. Now, that's a good thing if you don't like climbing, or if you get sick of it, so what if the champion abilities were folded into the magic system? And I think they'd have to be. Tying them to a solid resource is a much more satisfying way of balancing them than just using a timer. Then, people who want to deal with climbing honestly would have a reason to do so, and a reward. It gives the player a way to tailor the experience to what he wants, while also forcing the player into interesting choices. What tools do I most want with me when I go out to confront the world? Still, you might say, I still don't see how staring at a sunken chest I can't lift up is interesting. Well, Breath of the Wild is all about seeing something, marking it on your map, then dealing with it later. So that objection is already par for the course. Your magic choices would be a dynamic thing, based on whether you're setting out to explore new territory, fight a tough enemy, or just cruising through a familiar zone to pick up some resources you need. Almost every area in the game has reasons to return to it, so introducing one more probably wouldn't disrupt players too much. But the amount of sunken chests, or floating chests, or rock encased chests that litter the map, that might be reduced if this magic system was implemented. Because if you've got more spells to play with, then you've got more varied types of challenges you can set up. You've got more keys, so you can set up more kinds of locks, so to speak. Maybe, instead of another rock encased chest, you find one in a magma float that needs to be frozen with a cold spell. Maybe instead of a sunken chest at the bottom of a lake, you find one guarded by a creature that has to be distracted by an illusion spell. I think this is another benefit a magic system could bring. The feeling of breaking through gated progression. The feeling you got in older Zeldas when you found a new item and knew you could go more places now and get more things. Images of places you've been, of riddles that had denied you, flashing in your brain as you excitedly take hold of their solution. It's something from previous games that was lost on Breath of the Wild, something I've seen a lot of people mourn, and I think magic, since there's really no limit on what you can do with it, would be the easiest way to bring it back. So, to summarize, a magic system would give you another meter to dump resources into. That meter would be another good ground for upgrades to hide throughout the game, as would the extra spell slots. The spells themselves would give you yet another thing to quest and hunt for, and expand the range of puzzles and systems the devs could play with, and add a layer of customization and progression that Breath of the Wild lacks. And most importantly, it would be fun. So that's why a proper magic system is my number one most wanted feature for Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom. Okay, let's see what's left. Comment below what you want to see in Breath of the Wild 2. Yep, that'll be good for engagement. Like and subscribe. I'm sure they've all already done that. Oh, and honorable mention goes to fishing rods. I mean, come on. They've implemented fishing in like 5 different Zelda games, and this is the one that misses out? How am I supposed to catch all these?